What's up, Nets fans? You are now in the Backcourt, presented by Ticketmaster, a Brooklyn Nets podcast. I am your host, Lucas Kaplan, and along with me, as always, is the other host, Sarah Kustok. Sarah, how are we doing today?
I'm fantastic, Lucas. I get to hang with you, talk some Nets hoops, so it's a good day. No complaints.
Of course, we are recording this on January 7th, a Tuesday, and so I think for me, this is the last day. This is the last day you can say Happy New Year. So I know this will come out in a couple days, but, Happy New Year to everybody. I'm recording it. It's within the week grace period. I don't know how you feel about that.
Well, I'll let you rock because you're leading the way. I normally give it, if I'm saying this, I would normally give people till the 3rd, and that's when
Okay.
it stops. Unless it's you. But
Oh, okay.
I support it. I think it's a great new year. I mean, I think you can give it a week. I don't know. At some point,
I'm
I think
embarrassed.
people don't be embarrassed. I love you no matter what. But I feel like people start to give the Happy New Year a couple days in advance of New Year, and then it
Right.
extends. So then you're in a whole week, and
Right.
now it's like let's just keep rocking with it.
You can't
But
say it twice to the same person, though. I think I'm only saying it because it's our first episode of the new year.
yes, and you're
To our
saying it to all
listeners.
Yeah, I
Yes.
like it. I like it.
Yes.
I'm with you. I'm with you.
Okay. Well, with that, let's I guess start it off lightly. What was your favorite basketball moment or sports moment or something you want to shout out from this past year, 2024?
That's a great question, and I won't take too long with it. I don't like to pick favorites because I love a lot of things, and then the more we talk, I start thinking of other stuff. I
Right.
just thought last year the Olympics was fun,
Oh yeah.
more than ever. Like, and you can go down obviously basketball, the greatness of both Team USA's, but the parity, the competitiveness, across the board, the women, the men, but all the sports. Like I just found it to be so thrilling to see, to watch, to experience all that stuff. So there was a lot of greatness of 2024, but I think Olympic competition is always special, and I thought there was a great energy and vibe that came from Paris that I really appreciated.
It's hard to beat the Olympics, honestly. That's why they're the Olympics. So I would have to agree. For me, that was incredible. I mean, it was my first year covering the Nets and the Liberty both full time. So I had basketball.
Yes,
I had basketball
yes,
around the clock. I felt like Sarah Kustok for the first time, and it was awesome. The Nets there were some crazy overlap moments when the Liberty were playing the Commissioner's Cup. The Nets made a couple trades in June that you may have heard about, and that was a long, busy night. But it was all very fun. I got to go to Minnesota, cover the WNBA Finals, and so it was a great basketball-filled year. And of course, the Olympics, watching Steph in that fourth quarter, I'll never forget, really in the last two games. So I had a great time with basketball last year, and it brings us to what we're looking forward to in 2025, which is really, among other things, a Nets team that has so much in the way of player development, young guys trying to make, a name, their way in the league, get better at minor skills, major skills. That's really right up my alley. So I'm so excited to personally just track, everybody's progress on this Brooklyn Nets team that I'm watching. You got a lot to look forward to for 2025. Today it was announced you'll be down with the gang in Miami for Unrivaled. So congrats on that. I wouldn't blame you if that's what you're looking forward to in 2025.
I'm thrilled for a lot of basketball. Yeah, I'll be back and forth from there a little bit. Of course, along with calling Brooklyn Nets games, and yeah, some great stuff, some college hoop, all the good things. So no, 2025. I'm always excited what a new year brings, because as we know, especially now with the NBA and the way things look and the way, to your point, of this Brooklyn Nets team, I think there's a lot of things to continue to track in what it may look like, not only for this season, but as you think about the summer, next season. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of moving parts, and ones that I think there's reason to be very excited about.
Definitely. One of those guys is Noah Clowney. I just gonna plug along, real in the weeds article I wrote on him out on NetsDaily today on
Please
Tuesday.
do hype
Yeah.
that up. That was excellent.
Oh, wow. Thank you. You read it. Very nice. Yeah, it's 2,000 words on just what we've seen from him so far, what he's going to be. And, there's also a film focus with Noah Clowney on the Nets YouTube channel. So we're off to a great start, I think, in 2025. As are the Nets. Since we recorded last, they played 4 games. They had a Toronto-Milwaukee back-to-back, which they split. And then amid a crazy amount of injuries, honestly, they've come home, lost to Philly, and then picked it up and lost to Indiana in what honestly turned into a fun game last night. I wasn't sure it was going to be. Again, we're recording this Tuesday. They lost to Indiana on Monday. Wasn't sure how fun it was going to be, just given the amount of bodies they were down. But again, a lot of these young guys, these unproven guys, stepped up, fought, and made it a fun game. What are your takeaways as we are truly now in the thick of this NBA season? We're in January. There's like 10 games a week these teams are playing. It feels like there's injuries. There's new guys stepping up. Where are you at with this Brooklyn Nets team?
I think to your point, there have been so many iterations already of what this season has looked like. It only being the start of January. And I think the fun part, you think about the way the season started, exceeding expectations, the way the group had come together after a tremendous preseason, the look of Jordy Fernandez and this coaching staff as a new head coach. I know he's the head coach of the Canadian national team, speaking of the Olympics, but you cannot say enough about the job that he has done with the versatility and the changes that they have dealt with along with the players on what seems like a day-by-day basis. And whether it's the lineups, the rosters, the trades, the injuries, there is always an adaptability and what feels like a very well laid out game plan and execution of a game plan, regardless of who's on the floor. And to me, that has been the biggest bright spot of things you continue to build on. It's not often with a first year head coach that you like don't even think about him in that manner. And I know he has a resume filled with a lot of very robust experience in different spots. But there is a continuity and a consistency we have seen on a night by night basis. So I'll start with that. Because this past week, I think it kind of was indicative of what that looked like. You talk about the split between Toronto and Milwaukee, and the Milwaukee was such a bittersweet win. It was a brilliant, big time push by Brooklyn, their ability to close it out with the composure. But the fact that at the very end of that game, you lose a player and hopefully for not much longer, but Cam Johnson and what that looks like. Cam Thomas, on the shelf for a little bit right now. You had mentioned D'Angelo Russell in just kind of the timeline of it. And there's a lot of unknowns with injuries, but I think overall for this group then to watch them against an Indiana team that had been playing very, very well and very well on the road, expected to, at the start of the season, potentially be a contender in the East or in some capacity and underperformed early on, but starting to put things together. The score did not necessarily show the fight that they had provided by a lot of young players that I know we'll get into. So that's where I just think there is a level of resiliency of this team and a fight for one another, playing for one another that has continued to impress me. No matter who is on the floor, no matter what it looks like, no matter the circumstance, that is how they've shown up. And that I really, really love about this group.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to, I guess, underestimate or not really visualize. Like, we have a hard time, analyzing what coaching is, like what that affects. You see what the players do, what they're good, what they're bad at. You don't really know what's on coaching, right? But I think you do really see this prior experience Jordy Fernandez has had as, national team head coaches, coaching for Canada, front of the bench, lead assistant in Sacramento. Like, I was watching Kings Heat at the end of last night, a crazy double overtime game, and each of those teams were only missing one of their top 6-7 guys. Granted, it was De'Aaron Fox and Jimmy Butler, but just how disorganized and like the lack of rhythm and flow in their offenses. I don't mean to, denigrate those two teams. And I know it was crunch time, but like watching the Nets miss against Indiana, they're missing Ben Simmons, Cam Thomas, Cam Johnson, D'Angelo Russell, someone else too that I'm forgetting. But
Trendon Watford,
Trendon Watford
still, because he's been a while.
Trendon Watford. Mm-hmm. So that's like probably their 5 best ball handlers, or the 5 guys that would dribble the ball the most if they were healthy, and yet there's still like a structure and flow to their offense. I clipped a few, plays in Milwaukee where they started. It's so simple, but it's so effective. They started with this flex action you were there for. Like Keon Johnson got a layup on the first play of the game. And then the next play of the game, it was the same action, but like the screener was flipped. And then the next play, it was a ghost screen. And then the next play, and so on and so forth. So he's building out these quote unquote simple offenses really effectively, and it's fun to watch. And I think it's easy to take that stuff for granted until, you're up against it and you're missing 5 players. Just to recap a bit of the injuries, Cam Johnson, tweaked ankle. He's expected to be reevaluated very soon. Cam Thomas will be reevaluated when the Nets finish up an upcoming West Coast road trip. Trendon Watford almost back. On-court activities he's already resumed. And Ben Simmons and D'Angelo Russell, from what I gather, are very day-to-day. Both were questionable last night, potentially not too far away. So not terrible news on the injury front. And a shout-out to Maxwell Lewis, who suffered what looked like a really scary injury against the Toronto Raptors. I don't know if it's good news, but potentially back before the end of the season, wishing him the best. And but it's that time of the year, January. A lot of teams are super banged up, and it's nice to see the Nets not use that as an excuse. And it's nice to see one of those guys, before he got hurt, D'Angelo Russell, played a full 2.5 games. I feel like we've gotten enough to know and learn what he's going to bring to the team, even though he got hurt at halftime of the Sixers game. So what have you seen from D'Angelo Russell, aside from just a full circle moment of D'Lo being a Brooklyn Net once again?
It was wild. I was thinking about that when he joined the team. I was sitting watching shoot around in Toronto, and I was like, man, this is both incredible, but also very weird. Seeing how it went and watching him play. And I think the fun part had been and has been that you see the skill set and the strengths and the things that we saw of him as a young player coming over and playing with Brooklyn in areas that he thrived. When he had that all-star season, you understand the tendencies of his game, but you can tell after spending some years away and being in Minnesota and being with the Lakers, as all players do, there's a refinement to it and an improvement of it. He's been shooting the 3 ball extremely well, but a lot of it too is just the reminder of the vision that he has on the floor and how he can find teammates and make passes and the basketball intelligence with it. And I think early on we saw especially a handful of plays of just a read and react moments of a couple veteran players, just understanding how to break down a defense with him and Cam Johnson, and some of the slips or some of the backdoor cuts, the advancement in transition. There's a lot of aspects of his game I know we think so often, which he is very good at, of his pick and roll game and the game slowing down just a little bit. And I thought the one thing I really loved was that it didn't feel like the ball stuck a lot. There was movement, there was quick decision making that was both in the half court, in the full court. And that's the reminder of the way he sees the game. There are aspects that the Nets don't entirely have to shift when some of these players are healthy and back. Their offensive philosophy of what they're going to do, will then return to being probably a little bit more pick and roll heavy. But there is a pace and a tempo that he's still able to play at. And I really, really loved watching that.
I'm so glad you brought up the pace and the tempo first, in addition to, everything else we know he can do, because for me, the thing that popped the most was how he got them in transition and how he upped the pace. I'm looking at Cleaning the Glass right now. It has on-off stats, and, he's only played 70 minutes. So take the on-off stats with a bit of a grain of salt, but they really match the eye test. It says that he already has, the biggest swing for the Nets in terms of how well the transition offense is with him on versus when he sits. And especially in the Toronto game, I just felt like he made a lot of quick get-ahead passes. He had a couple 2-on-1s with Tyrese Martin that ended in wide open layups. So he's the type of passer, I think, where the more space you give him, the better he gets. Because it's not that he can't pass in tight spaces, and he had a ridiculous dime to Cam Johnson on a back cut up in Toronto. But when he's able to play in the full court and read all 9 guys, and there's just so much space, and he can kick it 40 feet ahead if he has to, he's a really, really effective passer. And you don't think of him as a super athlete, the way you think of Giannis or Russell Westbrook in transition, but he can be a very effective transition player just based on the way he sees the floor and gets the ball ahead. And the Nets have really needed that, I think, with their transition offense. Elsewhere, just, you run actions with D'Lo, shooter, big, like Cam Johnson, Nick Claxton, and he's going to make the right decision and get you a good look. So it's very fun that he's back, and we are definitely wishing that he's not out too long. He's hopefully he's going to throw a lot of lobs to Nick Claxton, Day'Ron Sharpe, these rolling bigs. I think the Nets have missed a little bit of that since they traded Dennis Schroeder, but savvy move to get a great passing guard right back. It's not often you can luck into that in the NBA. You know what I mean? Moving on, just well, not necessarily moving on. We're kind of keeping it with the offense. What do you think? D'Lo players out. Where do you see the Nets? Where will they be able to kind of make up in your mind for all of the guys in and out of the lineup? What is something they can just get better at in the short term as they wait for a lot of these players to gel?
I think we saw it last night
All right.
in the game against Indiana of just one attention to detail on cutting
Okay.
and movement in the half court. I think in any case,
Mhm.
if your defense is better, and we saw more of that where, some of these lineups, they looked, I know there was a lot of players missing, but when you have a Ziaire Williams and a Noah Clowney and a Nick Claxton, on Tyrese Martin, whoever was in that fifth spot, whether it was Jalen Wilson or, there was length and there was an ability to defend. You're getting stops, you can get runouts. So trying to amp it up in transition, you're always going to have better opportunities with that early offense. The offensive rebounding. It missed a lot of shots early. You don't love that, but there was an attack mindedness of how they were able to get second chance opportunities. But I think in the half court, continuing to rely on the spacing, the cutting, all those actions you talked about that Jordy Fernandez is really good at in stalling in the offense or having sets or having options of the DHOs or of just random screening or however they're playing off of one another, the awareness of that. And so to me, it's a lot of those little things. Like you got to make if you're setting, a wide pit, like you got to make sure that your angles are correct. You got to
Mhm.
make sure you're
Mhm.
covering off shoulders. The small technical things that are going to give you an extra step or going to get a guy on your hip or going to allow you a little bit of leeway. You've got to make sure you're doing that. You got to keep moving. You can't just go through the motions in certain possessions. And I know I've now already said a lot of things, but you got to take care of the basketball and be really mindful.
Mhm.
And Jordy Fernandez always talks about, 14 of those are mine, guys playing freely.
Right.
But you have to make sure, especially the live ball turnovers, that those are eliminated to some regard or at least mitigated where teams aren't getting a lot of easy baskets. Because I think that's where Indiana, for as many stretches as they had where it felt like a sustainable game, they can open it up in a hurry as a lot of teams can if you
Mhm.
give them a couple
Yeah.
2 3 easy ones, and then it allows them to get going, and then oftentimes that's where those leads tend to balloon.
It is funny watching how much of the NBA is just confidence, not even like player to player situation, but even like within a game. You can feel
Yes.
as I'm like now watching every game, like
Mhm.
I'm at half of the games. I'm at all the home games. You really can feel when guys get loose, catch a rhythm. And then it's easy to say, oh, well, this guy made a contested 25-footer. But the things that allowed him to get in rhythm leading up to that are probably or more likely to be your fault or something controllable, something that the Nets can control.
Yes.
I do want to give them credit, though. Man, they kept themselves in that game by sheer will on defense.
Yeah.
The second
Mhm.
units in the third quarter. Honestly, the first quarter, they were just flying around, making rotations. That was really impressive. Brooklyn's finest. Now, this is probably the most wide open field we've done for Brooklyn's finest, an award we like to give to a player or two or three, that you want to shout out from this past week. There are many candidates. You could give it to some players who played a couple of minutes and shined. You could give it to some guys that had to carry a lot more of the load than they're used to. So I'm really interested to see where you want to start out, who you want to give a shout out to.
This is I don't wanna say this is a tough one for me, but there was a lot of different, there's a lot of different players that I would look at and, there was bright spots and there was things that I was very impressed with. But I'm gonna go with Ziaire Williams. I think
Mm-hmm.
that he
Yeah.
Um, he made his return back into the lineup, did the things that you rely on him to do, the activity on the defensive side, using his length, his quickness, his versatility. And then also when he can knock down 3-point shots at a consistent rate, it changes the complexion of how a defense has to play. And I know that's a big part of his game that he's been working out through the early part of his young career. But at the start of the season, he was very efficient from beyond the arc. And once again, you see it here. And that goes back to the confidence. When there is a green light, when you are encouraged to take those shots, he's taken them with confidence and he's hit some really, really timely ones. But I think overall, it's the activity, it's the energy, it's the vibe
Yeah.
that filters into different aspects of how the team plays. And it's just been fun to see him back on the court and back. And I think he's a difference maker, and that will continue to hopefully flourish as the season goes on.
It's funny because he's played 3 games since returning from a left knee sprain, which kept him out over a month. And in the first game, it was in Milwaukee, and he scored only 8 points in 19 minutes. You know, he scored in double digits since in each of the last 2 games. But I felt like the Milwaukee game might have been like his best game. Maybe it's because the Nets were winning, you know, and he was in a position to make some big clutch plays down the stretch. He knocked down, you know, the game-sealing free throws that pushed the lead to 3.
Yes.
He
yes.
made a couple threes late, you know, he got a couple deflections. You know, I'm struggling to remember the specific plays, but I just remember watching and being like, man, he's kind of all over the court.
Yes.
In his first game
yes.
back against, you know, a good team in Milwaukee. I'm sure like
And-
that, yeah, is what you noticed.
And the last thing I'll say is before you go to I also think there was a balance, and this is easier said than done, but you miss a month to come back and to be aggressive, to pressure the ball, to be all over the place and really active energy, but do so cleanly and do so within the construct of what you're trying to accomplish. Where it's not just reckless activity and energy. There's a purpose behind all of it, and I felt like he really nailed that.
Also, he blocked Bobby Portis at the rim and then talked a bunch of trash, which I really enjoyed. Well, Bobby started it, but I think Ziaire blocking a dunk, you know, was a very fun play to make in like his first stint back in over a month. That stuck in my heart.
Absolutely.
And then, in the last 2 games since, he's scored in double digits, been a part of some strong play on the court. So happy to see him back, and impressive that he is what is he right now? 8 for 15 from 3 in his 3 games coming back. You know, he wasn't shooting the ball as well before he got hurt. Maybe all he needed was a little time off, you know, a little refresher, and he's coming back with a vengeance, which I love to see. There's a lot of guys that I could shout out, and when we do next net, you know, I'm sure we'll touch on all these guys. I'm gonna go with Tyrese Martin. I remember we were on the before they went to the West Coast for the first time. You added a little disclaimer at the end. It was back in early November, mid-November, and you said, you know, I'm not giving Brooklyn's finest to Tyrese Martin. He hasn't played a ton, you know, outside of end-of-game situations, but I just want to, you know, add him on as an addendum. Watch out, you know, I'm in practice, I'm seeing blah blah blah, and I was like, okay, interesting. That's a good shout. And then he had 30 points in Phoenix. So I really want to give you credit for kickstarting this, because now
Thank you. I'll take it.
every time I watch Tyrese Martin play, I feel like he's just doing good stuff. That's really it. I mean, we can expound on what the good stuff is, but every time he gets in, I'm like, damn, you know, that was a good play. Oh, that was a good play. Oh, that was a pretty good play. Just over and over and over, I feel like.
I'm gonna parlay you into teeing up that I didn't choose him because he's gonna be my choice for next net.
Okay. But good segue.
Here today. So as I continue to talk, I want to say that, so then it's not doubling down to yours.
Right.
But I do. I think he's got a level of just feeling like he belongs. And that's both in how you watch him play and the energy you get off of him. Like, he believes that he should be on the floor and does those things. And I think the shot making is one thing, and especially from the 3-point line, that you love, and it is size, but it's just like a lot of the little stuff. And Jordi Fernandez talked about him in the pregame press conference prior to Indiana, and what he said, which was a reminder, because I sat through training camp, sat through those practices, and watch, he was competing for that two-way spot. He did not have the two-way spot. He was not
Hmm.
guaranteed to be on this team. Or to have that two-way position, and that was part of it, and then he earned that, and then he's continued to take advantage of every opportunity, no matter how big or small that he's been on the court. So even when it was the end of game, 2 or 3 minutes, you saw it. Even when you go back to Phoenix and he had just a absolutely explosive game and how efficient he was, but there is a steadiness that he has brought, and to me, it's shown in what he can become in the league,
Hmm.
and I think that's the fun part for a player who, 25 years old, picked late in the second round, but you can tell that there's an understanding of what's needed and what's asked of him, and it feels like he just shows up and does that every day.
Definitely. He just feels like a guy. And that is the simplest way to put it. Just watching him
Mhm.
play, he just feels like an NBA player. And that is no small accomplishment for, a guy who is 25 years old and was in the G League and didn't get a ton of run with the NBA squad when he was with Atlanta. A potentially super impressive find to just find an NBA player like this by Brooklyn's front office and their player development staff. It doesn't just happen overnight. Guys aren't finished products. And, Tyrese is now having a better 3-point shooting season at 36% than he's had at a lot of levels in his career on the most volume. And he takes a lot of tough threes. Like he takes off movement, contest, hand in his face. It's not just stand still, wide open, set shot
Catch
sort
and
of
shoot
stuff.
because someone's created absolutely, and I feel like in the last thing, and then you can get to your next net. I feel like he's created well for teammates, so
Yeah.
more
Yep.
so that he's finding teammates if he doesn't have a look, and that has been something that I liked.
It is cool that he's theoretically, or maybe, you think it's a 3-and-D player, he's not going to put it on the floor much. But then when he gets into the lane, his decision making has been really good, especially like on dribble handoff scenarios. He had that play in Toronto I'm thinking of where he threw an alley-oop with the left hand, like kind of over his head to Nick Claxton for a dunk. He had a pass last night on the baseline in Indiana that I clipped on my Twitter where he was on the baseline and threw it out with his left hand for a Ziaire Williams 3. So he just makes athletic, smart plays. And you need guys that are athletic and smart. And speaking of guys that seem to be athletic and smart, my next net is Tosan Awoma. Just because
Yeah,
he's
let's
a
go.
he's a great story, man. Like the first Brit, by the way, to ever play for the Nets NBA franchise. Maybe should have included that in trivia, but it's okay. He,
I would have got him next, so better off.
yeah, that's
Better
true.
off. We
Who-
talked about it in the broadcast, so
Yeah, who's the first net Brit to play for the Nets is it's too topical. By the way, did you know he helped to start the high school basketball team in his hometown in the UK? He helped start the basketball team
I
at.
did not know that.
Oh man, I should have looked this up beforehand. But he is a proud graduate of the Royal Grammar School of Newcastle in the UK, and he helped start the basketball team.
I
there.
love it. I love it.
Goes to Princeton. Seems like a genius. Just talking about his studies there and his path there. He's played for 2 NBA teams. He's gotten run with 4 G League teams. Signs with the Nets, the Long Island Nets, the G League team, which has been a great factory for player development and all that.
Yes.
Shows up and scores 39 points, without a practice in his first game in Long Island. Brooklyn, I think, very wisely says, come on up, play some NBA minutes. And how did he look to you in that Indiana game? Because he looked pretty cool to me, pretty funky,
I kept saying it to Ian during the break. Not that we didn't talk about it in the broadcast, but during the break, and then talking to our truck and stuff over. I was like, I really like how he plays. I felt like he was positionally in good spots on both sides of the floor. He's got size
Yeah.
and can move, but there was a handful of defensive possessions when we're talking about the ways in which they had strong stretches at that end, that he was a part of that. And I'm excited to watch him play more because, to your point, I think there's a lot of things that are intriguing about what he could potentially add and what he's going to look like and what he looks like with more run. And I think for all players, you had mentioned what he did in Long Island. I think we've become so accustomed to the turnover of how this lineup and roster looks. each and every night because of changes. That's hard. Like, it's hard. It's hard playing with new players. It's hard trying to figure out the system in such a quick amount of time. There hasn't been a lot of practice time with this group. So that's where I say the impressive thing. And you talked about this earlier of how they've been able to look so organized, not perfect and making mistakes. And I
Hmm.
know it was, it was a 14-point loss. I'm not saying it was. Um, there was a lot of areas to clean up, but it certainly didn't look like a bunch of guys that hadn't spent a ton of time together, or maybe weren't on the floor together in different combinations. And I think he was a part of that.
Definitely. The skill that popped to me most was his closeouts. He had a few like
Yeah,
swarming,
good
like
call. Good call.
scary
Yeah.
closeouts.
Yeah, good call.
Like a bear running down its prey. Just like swarm with his long arms. Also, he's just huge with his shoulders and
Yeah,
biceps.
exactly.
I was like, oh man,
Exactly.
that's an NBA athlete. And you know who else is an NBA athlete? I'm gonna weave this into trivia because we're about wrapping up here, but we could have given any number of these awards, Brooklyn's finest, next net, to Day'Ron Sharpe just for the performance he had against Indiana. And frankly, I think he's been trending up for 2 weeks. I think he's made a ton of plays on defense, sliding his feet, contesting at the rim. He's missed a couple layups, but the finishing is starting to come back if last night is any indication, because he shot 8 of 13, 8 of 12 from 2. He had 16 points, 13 boards, 5 assists, and 9 of those boards were on the offensive end, which is just crazy. And I'm going to weave that into trivia because when we talk about rebounders, Day'Ron Sharpe is certainly one of, frankly, the best in Nets history. If you just look at rebounding percentage, how often he gets offensive rebounds, he's actually the all-time leader in offensive rebound percentage. I think I did a trivia question based on that a couple months ago. But what I want to ask you is, who is the all-time Nets NBA franchise, so New Jersey and Brooklyn, who is the all-time leader in total rebound percentage? Meaning, when a missed shot was available.
Oh, I'm gonna say Reggie Evans.
Correct. Loved Reggie, man. Loved Reggie.
I did too. I didn't know where you were going with this question, but I thought if you were trying to be a little bit sneaky on a rebounding question, that the answer was likely Reggie Evans because he
Yes.
was just a vacuum when he was on the floor.
Nothing sneaky about Reggie Evans. That's a brute force player. That's not
He
very.
was so fun to watch.
All right, bonus. If you remove any minimum filters for minutes, you didn't have to play a certain amount of minutes. Who is it? It's a name you know. It's recent Nets history in the last 5 years. Didn't play a ton with the franchise, but he grabbed every single rebound. This is a bonus. You got the question. I
No,
came
but
across this.
now I'm because I feel like I may know this because I'm like
Oh yeah.
imagining it in my head, and I'm gonna be really angry when you either tell me or start giving me clues. Recent.
There was one game in Utah where a ton of guys were out, and he had 20 rebounds. He had a 20 and 20 game, kind of out of nowhere.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
oh my goodness.
Alize Johnson.
Yes.
Alize.
I knew it. I was picturing him. I honest to goodness was picturing him when you first asked that question. And I'm like, the name is entirely escaping me, but I know there was something to it. And Alize, yeah.
Some of the best rebounders in Nets history, specifically Brooklyn Nets history, just guys that gobbled up everything. Maybe weren't here for the longest amount of time, but you always remember those lunch pail sort of guys. And Day'Ron Sharpe is one, and we wanted to shout him out. And anytime you mention Alize Johnson, it's a good show, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
So from me, Lucas Kaplan, you can find more of my work on NetsDaily and with Nets Film Focus. Sarah Kustok, you can find if you flip on, any TV channel playing sports. And probably Alize Johnson. He's a nice guy. I'm sure he would wish you all a happy new year. I will not say it again.
No, say it. I was going to say it if you didn't. So,
Okay. Happy
big
New
happy
Year,
New
everybody.
Year.
Looking forward to watching more Nets basketball in 2025. And hopefully for you guys listening to more of the Backcourt in 2025. A Brooklyn Nets podcast presented by Ticketmaster. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Much appreciated if you give a like, a subscription, a 5-star rating, whatever you do. We appreciate it. And we will see you next time. Thank you, guys.